it isn't my favorite ghosts, ghouls, and things that go bump in the night. Welcome. I am your host, the Haunted Horrorstorian, and today we have another spooky tale from the Emporium, sure to keep you enthralled. So, relax, take a seat, and listen to The Abandoned Tunnel. Tunnels are fascinating. Each one is unique. No two tunnels are alike. Well, that's not true, I suppose. Sometimes they do look alike, but that's besides the point. Some tunnels are underwater, some are underground, and others are built into mountains. Sometimes they're bridges, and sometimes their purpose is for people to walk through, while others are meant for trains or vehicles. And many of them are incredibly old. No one's sure when the tunnel was built. It was just there. It just seemed to materialize one day in the 1870s in a hilly area. It's about 3 miles long, so it's a pretty far trek. Mysteriously, there's no paved road under the tunnel. It was just a dirt path, worn away from several years of people walking through it. People were, at first, confused about the tunnel, which was understandable, but they grew to enjoy the mysterious charm of it. For several decades, people would often walk through the tunnel. Kids would skip school and hang out. Teenagers would camp out there to avoid responsibilities, and outsiders would visit. There was even a local wedding tradition. A newlywed couple had to walk through the tunnel holding hands. If they emerged with their hands still being held, that meant their marriage would be strong. If they came out the other side, not holding hands, their marriage was doomed. What I'm trying to say is the tunnel had become part of my town's culture for a long, long time. Things changed, however, in 1982. A group of boys had gone to the tunnel. In the middle of it, they found the remains of Edith and Edwin Lawrence, their throats slit. The locals were horrified, both by the murders and the fact that the police were never able to find a suspect. Just like that, the locals stopped going near the tunnels. The only ones who went there were outsiders or newcomers who had just moved into town, curious about the forbidden tunnel. The tunnel was sealed up in 2008, though. Kids always dared each other to walk through the tunnel to prove themselves, but no one has gone through with the dare, and adults use every excuse in the book to avoid going in. I've always suspected the severe aversion of the tunnel came from the fact that the murderer was never found. Kind of like, if I go through this tunnel, I'll be killed by the murderer, which I find rather dumb, because evidence suggested the Lawrence siblings had been killed elsewhere and their bodies had been dumped there. I'm one of the few townies who went through the tunnel, and let me tell you, it was crazy. I've always wanted to share this story, but could never tell anyone because I was worried I'd be laughed at. It was 2006, and I'm 10. In front of me is pure blackness. A gust of cold air brushed past me, a rather pleasant sensation, considering how hot it was outside. The tunnel stood before us. "You don't have to do this," Patricia, the one who dared me, quickly said. She'd gone pale the moment she felt the breeze. "Yeah," Michael added. "No one would blame you for backing out. Let's head to my house, Brendan." I brushed them off and took several steps towards the maw. "It'll be fine," I said. "I don't mind walking through here. Seriously, go wait for me on the other side." The two exchanged glances, hesitating. Finally, they nodded and began the long journey. According to the rules of the tunnel dare, both the person who issued the dare and a witness had to remain on the other side of the tunnel and wait for the other kid who had been dared. If the kid managed to walk through the tunnel and got to the other side, they were brave. The 2 kids had to be given a 5-minute start to walk around the tunnel to get to the other side, while the dared kid had to slowly walk through. If they rushed through the tunnel, this meant they were scared, and the witness had to be there to make sure there was no speed running. Though I was well aware of the bloody past of the structure, thanks to my parents and town legends, I was never scared of the tunnel. Whenever I was nearby, my eyes would always be drawn to it. It just called out to me. So, when Patricia challenged me to go through the tunnel, I was beyond thrilled. Granted, I could have gone exploring without being dared, but I never did. I guess I needed the excuse to go through. The tunnel was cool and dark. Thanks to the sunlight, I could see rather far into the tunnel. Unfortunately, that meant it would take me longer to get my eyes adjusted to the darkness. Before the Lawrence murders happened, there had been some debate about adding lights to the tunnel. The locals decided against lights, since they felt like it would be taking away from the mysterious charm. For 5 minutes or so, nothing seemed out of the ordinary, but I noticed how the temperature seemed to plummet the further I walked in. By the time I had walked a quarter mile, my teeth were chattering, and I had folded my arms over my chest, trying to keep warm. I'd been thinking to myself, why didn't I bring a sweater? When I noticed there was a figure just several feet from me. My eyes had adjusted to the darkness, so it was startling to see a figure come into existence from the blackness. As I cautiously approached, the figure turned to me. The person was a teenage boy, wearing a heavy sweater. Because of the lack of light, I couldn't make out any other details. "What are you doing in here, buddy?" he asked. "People never usually come through here." "I could be asking the same thing," I spoke, through chattering teeth. "People don't usually stand around in here either." The teen laughed and said, "Got me there, buddy." "Wow, are you doing all right?" I was bewildered. Didn't he feel how cold it was? But again, he was wearing a jacket. "I'm really cold," I admitted. "I was expecting it to be cold, but not this cold." "You can have my jacket if you want," the teenager said, and before I could turn down his offer, he was already taking off his jacket. "Seriously, take it. You probably need it more than I do." I accepted the jacket, which was big, and zipped it up. There was a slight smell of mildew coming from it, but I didn't mind. I was already starting to feel warm thanks to it. "Won't you be cold?" I asked, feeling bad. The teenager scoffed and flexed his arms. "Me? Feeling cold? No way. I've done enough sports in the cold. I'm practically immune to it. You can keep the coat, too. I need a new one." "So, what exactly are you doing in here?" When I told him about the dare, he sounded slightly impressed. Then he added, "That's pretty hardcore. Good luck to you on your journey." I asked, "What about you? Why are you here?" "My friend told me to meet him here," the teenager said. "He said he wanted to show me something." I thanked him for the coat and walked past him. After several feet, I glanced back, hoping to catch one last glimpse of the cool teenager. Unfortunately, he had melted back into the darkness, leaving me alone. The second incident happened when I reached the first mile. Rather than keeping an eye on the dirt floor, I kept my gaze trained on the small pinprick of light far in the distance. So it wasn't surprising I tripped over a pair of legs and nearly fell face first into the earth. "What the heck?" a girl shrieked, and I looked behind me to see her get to her feet. Just like the teenager, I couldn't see much. All I saw was her silhouette and the shape of her clothes and hair. "Watch where you're going, dork." Dork? What was this? Some kind of TV show? "I didn't see you there," I said. "In case you hadn't noticed, it's dark in here. Besides, why are you sitting on the ground?" The girl placed her hands on her hips. I'm hiding here until it's evening. My parents think I have a job. Aren't there better places to hide? I was bewildered. Camping out in a pitch-black tunnel did not seem like an ideal hiding space. This is the best place to hide, she insisted. As you said, it's dark in here. I usually keep my legs tucked close to prevent people from discovering me, but I accidentally fell asleep. So, thanks for waking me up, I guess. Do you know what time it is? Last I checked, it was around 11 a.m., I responded. Dang. Only a few more hours. She sat back down, hugging her knees to her chest. You better keep on going, kid. You've got a long walk ahead of you. Better get out before it's dark. Why do you say that? I inquired, glancing towards the small dot of light. Miss... When I turned back around to look at the girl, she was gone, consumed by the darkness. She was probably still there, but choosing to ignore me. Stupid older kids, trying to be all cool and mysterious. I had no means of checking for the time, but I had the feeling that a lot of time had passed since I encountered the girl. I'll be honest, I was starting to feel panicky. It felt like the small dot of light on the horizon hadn't grown any bigger, and my legs were starting to ache. Okay, I told myself, taking a moment to sit down on the ground, pressing my back against the tunnel wall. Just a 5-minute break. I glanced to my left and noticed the entrance I went through was also a small dot of light on the horizon. I must be near the middle point. I let out a sigh, closed my eyes, wondering if I had made a big mistake by choosing to do this dare. If only I'd thought to bring a snack. That would probably ease my nerves. What is this? A man's voice asked, and my eyes shot open. Standing over me was a tall figure, completely enshrouded by darkness. He took several steps back when I scrambled to my feet. Boy, what are you doing here? I'm walking through the tunnel, I stammered. The hair on the back of my neck stood on end. I couldn't see him clearly, and the fact that there was a man here made me uncomfortable. A small part of my brain went, oh no, it's the Lawrence killer. But I chose to ignore that. I can see that, the man said, sounding exasperated. But I'm asking why you thought it was a smart idea to walk through here. In case you don't know, this tunnel isn't the best place for humans like you. What on earth was this guy talking about? There are other people here too, I said, bristling. A boy and a girl. So it's perfectly fine for us humans. You met 2 other people? The man asked, his voice sounding gruffer. Man, now that I look at you, you're wearing Ed's jacket. You're an idiot, you know that? Take off that jacket and give it to me. When I refused to do so, the man stepped close and ripped the jacket off, ignoring my yelling. Listen here, boy. Those 2 humans you met, they're dead. Been dead since the 1980s. He shook the jacket in my face. This tunnel is meant for the dead, you hear me? You already messed up by talking to them both and accepting this jacket. Thank God I found you, else you'd die the moment you stepped out wearing this. You've got to be joking, I said. Those 2 were alive. I don't believe you. Don't believe me, huh? All right, I'll show you proof. The man slung the jacket over his shoulder and seemed to dig through his pockets. He produced a lighter from his pocket and managed to get the flame on the first try. He laughed when I screamed. His face was a skeleton, but everything else about him seemed human. Do you believe me now? Yes, I believe you, I yelped, cowering. Good. Now listen to me very carefully. You're a bit far from the exit, but you'll soon get there. The 2 you met earlier are the more recent additions to the tunnel. Unfortunately, you'll encounter 2 more dead people further in. Do not acknowledge them or let them grab you. Normally, if you talk to the dead in macabre tunnels, you decrease the chances of returning to your world. But those fellas up ahead are angry, scared, and desperate. The moment you acknowledge them, they will tear you apart. They've been here for so long, they think living humans are their only chance of getting out. Do you understand, boy? Yes, I said, but what is this place? I'd love to give you a history lesson of the tunnels, Skullhead said, but you need to get out of here before nighttime. Then you'll be stuck here. He consulted the old watch on his other wrist, the small flame letting him see the time. You've got a few hours left if you jog. I feel bad, so I'll escort you a quarter mile. A quarter mile, I whined. But the dead people. Would you prefer to walk alone? Skullhead demanded. No, sir. When we reached the distance Skullhead promised he'd take me to, he vanished into the darkness, with a warning for me not to look back. And then I was alone. Although he was incredibly disturbing, I missed having a companion. I walked a little while longer and was grateful to see that the light coming from the exit seemed to be getting brighter and brighter. That meant I could see more in the distance compared to 5 minutes ago. This also meant I could see two figures in the distance. Because they were so far away, they looked like small toys in front of a light bulb. When I got closer to them, maybe just a few yards away, I noticed they both wore clothing from the 1870s. A woman stood on the right side of the tunnel, and the man laid on the ground of the left side. He was moaning in pain while the woman swayed back and forth, and I could hear her muttering prayers under her breath. Thankfully, the tunnel was big enough for me to walk past them both, but it was still small enough to make me uncomfortable. The woman caught sight of me when I came into her peripheral vision, and she let out a piercing shriek. I darted past the two, ducking when the woman reached out, and jumping over the man who tried to grab my ankle. They reeked of decay, and out of the corner of my eye, I noticed how the skin on the woman's face seemed to be peeling off. I'm unsure why Skullhead made such a big fuss about these two. They moved incredibly slow, and didn't even come close to touching me. I'm not sure how much time had passed, but after a while, I noticed how finally the tunnel was getting brighter, and the exit was in sight. I was almost free. I probably jinxed myself at that exact moment, thinking I was safe, because I wasn't. Suddenly, something made a huge, strange noise, followed by the sound of sharp nails scrabbling at the tunnel walls, and I heard the thud of something hitting the ground behind me. I almost looked back, but Skullhead's warning came back to me, so I did what any smart person would do in that kind of situation. I ran, and the thing behind me gave chase. Its breathing became heavy, and I could feel its feet hitting the earth floor. While I was running for my life, I was also cursing out Skullhead. He didn't bother to warn me about whatever that thing was, and I had no doubt he was laughing to himself about it. To this day, I still resent him for that. The tunnel exit was finally in sight. Large claws swiped at my back, ripping open my shirt and drawing blood. The attack sent me flying, and thankfully, launched me out of the tunnel. I landed at the feet of a startled Patricia and Michael. Behind me, lurking in the darkness, the monster let out a frustrated yowl, scaring the other two. "What was that?" Patricia shrieked. "I'd rather not find out," I gasped, scrambling to my feet, and took off back towards town. Patricia and Michael wisely followed. Besides me, only Patricia and Michael are the ones who know and believe me about the tunnel. How could they not? They both heard the monster, saw that my shirt was torn, and my back was bloody. They had no other choice but to believe me. In 2018, the town decided to demolish the tunnel because someone else had gotten hurt inside. When nothing managed to even damage the tunnel, The town went ahead and sealed it up, first with bricks, then with concrete. I wasn't at all sad. And that, dear listeners, is your first story from the Haunted Horrorstorian. If you have a story to add to our Emporium shelves, please send it to me at macabremarvel@gmail.com. That's MacabreMarvel@gmail.com. Until next time, friends, stay spooky, and remember, sometimes it's more than just a story.